Good evening. Good evening. This is to remind you there's a book raffle tonight. The books are in the back, and you can buy one ticket for $5. You can buy 5 tickets for $20. So dig into the wallet. We've got books on sale too. We've got Larry's book in the back, and he'll sign it for you when we are all done. And we've got another blue book. Where's Ann? There it is. Ann, show them the book, the blue book. It's the reprint of the famous blue book from 1948. 69. So they're for sale too. So dig into that wallet. I even got a membership renewal today. So get that money out. Okay. Welcome again. We have here with us tonight some honored guests. That's Betty Intagliata and her husband, Paul. As you may realize, we named this lecture series after her. All thanks to the generosity of Bill Jervey, who's also here tonight. Oh, Bill. Bill sponsored these so that we don't have to charge admission. So you're all welcome to be take that money that you were going to spend on admission and buy a book, or 2, or 3. Okay. Where's Beth? There you are. You're hiding in the back. You're so shy. You're so shy.
Thank you, Frank. Hi, good evening, everyone. Ooh, I have a loud voice. I'm Beth Gehring. I'm the membership chair of VAHS, and I've kind of been working the room, and I hope I've met most of you, trying to put faces to names. And so anyway, thank you so much for coming tonight to support our lecture series. Let me just ask, who is, if you're a member already, would you raise your hand, please, of VAHS? Okay, we got a lot. And don't be shy if you're not a member. You're more than welcome to be here. Would you raise your hand? Okay, you can raise it high. I won't get mad at you. Anyway, I'll stalk you. Well, to those of you who are members, thank you very much for your support of our mission of education and historic preservation. And for those of you who are not members, now would be the best time to join, because the Venice Centennial kicks off with the holiday parade on November 29th. And we are going to be doing so much special programming in honor, in celebration of our birthday. We're going to be having special events at the KMI building, at the Italian American Club of Venice, and at the Lord Heigl House Coffee Shop, which we hope is opening this coming weekend. And many of these events include a historical component, some type of talk or lecture, and they are member-only events. So if you gotta pay if you want to play. So I am inviting you all, if you're not a member, to give us a serious look-see. There are some membership brochures here that are on the back table. When you leave, pick up one. There's a nifty QR code that you can scan and join very easily that way. Also, you can go on our website, VeniceAreaHistoricalSociety.org. Just click on the Join Now little link, and that'll take you to our membership page as well. So give it some thought, because there's a lot that's going to be going on in the next 18 months. And if you want to be in the middle of it and where the action is, that is the Venice Area Historical Society. So thank you very much.
Well, we have a special speaker tonight, Larry Humes. That's why you came out, I know. We've almost filled the room here. So to introduce Larry to you, though, is Irvin Lewin. Irvin, come on up.
Wow, a lot of people. Thank you so much for coming. So I'm introducing Larry. So a couple weeks ago, I asked Larry to go ahead and send me a bio so I could put some notes together, for his introduction. And he sent me this bio, and it was the most dry. It was like this long paragraph of just like listing. Larry, you're a professional writer, So it wasn't good enough for me. So I got on, I Googled Larry, and I ended up with several pages of stuff. But of course, you don't want to hear me talk about, several pages worth of stuff. So I just picked a few things here that maybe I think maybe you haven't heard before. So Larry has been a contributor as a journalist, as a writer, as an editor at so many levels. So internationally, Larry has contributed articles for the United Press International during his career. Okay, let's go down to national. He was the editor of the Green Tree Gazette, a bi-monthly national magazine targeting higher education administrators, a national publication. Regionally, did you know that from the Sarasota Alliance for Historic Preservation, he received the Sarasota County Heritage Award for Historical Research? That's in 2022. Same year, he received a Historical Research Award from the Sarasota Scene magazine. Now, coming locally, past president of Venice Heritage Inc., who bestowed their honor of Community Service Award 2021. All these dates are like 2021, 20. I mean, he must have been really active for a couple of years there. Let me rephrase that. He was being rewarded for his many, many years. The community came to the realization that this man needs to be recognized and appreciated. So all at the same time, everybody figured this out. Okay, so in 2022, this is a good one. So Larry, writing for the Venice Gondolier, won first place in the Florida Press Association weekly newspaper contest in the community history category. And he got that for a series of articles that he wrote for the Gondolier, collectively called Preserving Venice. Is that about accurate? And of course, we read his articles all the time in the Venice Gondolier. He's the community here. We appreciate, we enjoy his articles, his books, his publications, his presentations are fabulous. And I'll make one little pitch here also for the book we have. This is a shameless pitch for you guys to buy books, but it really is. It's a really well written and great book. Larry has a style of presentation where it's very conversational. I really like. He's kind of like a mentor to me. I try to mimic that, and so he's very good at that. And his book reads the same way. So it's not like reading a dry textbook. It's like you're reading somebody telling you a story about Venice history, and it becomes a page-turner, honestly. So I highly recommend his book. And what else did I want to say? Well, what did I write down here? A well-known and respected figure in Venice, I'm happy to introduce Larry Humes.
Thank you, Irvin. My father would have appreciated your remarks. And my mother would have believed them. Good evening. Anybody want to talk about history? Yes. Well, great. We'll have a good time tonight. Just curious, I want to ask a question. How many of you have read the book that I wrote that came out last year? Quite a few of us. So I'm just curious, what chapter, what events, what in the book did you find the most interesting? Anybody just yell it out.
9/11.
Pardon?
9/11.
9/11. Good. Yeah, that was interesting.
Joseph Lord.
Which one?
Joseph Lord.
Oh, Joseph Lord, yes. First chapter, yeah, the promoter. Actually, the person that, or not the person, but the chapter that I enjoyed the most was the one on the BLE, the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers. And I always wondered, how in the world did the union get interested in building a city, and how did it go so wrong? It was very, very interesting. And the more I did research on the BLE and their involvement with Venice, the more that I learned about how this thing all came about. Very, very interesting. What's the wrong way? Right button. Yep, I've got it, Tom. Thank you, sir. I'm a writer, not an engineer here. That's the problem. Bear with me here. Am I going the wrong way? Still? Trying to click on the right. There, there we go. No? Oh, it's going to be a long evening, isn't it? What am I pushing around here? I know I'm supposed to push the right. Oh, wait, is it on the back side? No? Right side up. My wife is here tonight and she's laughing back there. She's saying, this is so him. How about that? Right side up, my God. Anyway, in 1863, in May of 1863, the Brotherhood of the Footboard was founded. Now, can anybody tell me what a footboard is? It was a plank of wood that the engineer would stand on to reach the dials and look out the window of the locomotive. But the problem was the American public got pretty much the same reaction as you just gave it. So they changed the name to the Brotherhood of the Locomotive Engineers. And why did they go into business? Because this was locomotive railroading in the mid-19th century was such a dangerous occupation. People that worked for the railroad could not get insurance. No insurance company would insure them. And so the union was founded in order to provide them life insurance. That was really the reason that it came into being. And as you can see, by the 1920s, there were 91,000 members of the BLE. BLE is still in existence today, but they had 91,000 members as early as 1925 because it was the only place they could get insurance. Anybody remember Casey Jones, the story of Casey Jones? Yeah. This is Warren Stone. Warren Stone was the Grand Chief Engineer of the, and hold on, I'm not seeing my notes here. There we go. He was the Grand Chief Engineer of the BLE back at the turn of the century. And he believed that the difference between a guy driving a locomotive and somebody like a J.P. Morgan or a Henry Flagler, the big difference was banks. That the place to make real money was changing money, exchanging it, and making loans and gathering the interest. And so he felt like the railroads should get into the banking business. And he was so convincing, and he was very well respected, I might say, not just by the locomotives, or the locomotive engineers, but by the presidents of some of the captains of industry, Fortune 100 companies. They thought this guy was a pretty smart guy. And so the union members started getting excited about it, and Stone was encouraging them, invest in banks, and we'll make it happen. This is the first bank. You're seeing it, and I'm not. I don't know why. What's going on here? Hold on. Just a second. Bear with me. We're going to get this fixed. Yes, this is the first bank that was created in 1912. It was the Cooperative National Bank in Cleveland, Ohio. That was the building. Their assets were increasing. They were raising their assets at a rate of $1 million a month. This is 1924. It's pretty, or 1912, I should say. They were by the time they were investing in the Venice project, they had controlling interest in some 35 banks all over the country. They also had, and look at the last line there, where they talk about underwriting capability. They could write their own checks. I mean, they could borrow money, didn't have to worry about the collateral. They would just contact the banks and say, I need money, and they'd send them blank checks, and that's the way it kind of got started. Very dangerous operation. And Stone, was famous for saying, and hold on to that phrase because you'll see it again. He said, running a bank is as simple as running a peanut stand. And that would come back to bite him. He'd be dead by then, but that would come back to bite him. This is the BLE Bank building that was built in Cleveland, Ohio in 1924 by the Fuller Construction Company. And Fuller Construction, it will be the company also a year later that they would retain to build the buildings in Venice, in the city of Venice. But this was their headquarters there in Cleveland, Ohio. So by 1925, the Union had accumulated $150 million in assets. And as I said, they enjoyed controlling interest in some 35 banks all over the country. It had become, and I want you to remember this last line here, it had become an organization that was simply too big to fail. Too big to fail. Now, I want to stop and go back a little bit and talk about the land that we're looking at here that's in place. The first, and I don't really have his picture up there, and you're not seeing it because I didn't click it. There we go. In the upper left-hand corner, of course, that's Bertha Honore Palmer. I don't have a picture up there of Joseph Haley Lord. Joseph Lord came here in the late 19th century. He's the first chapter in my book, and I describe him as the promoter because this guy was selling, well, Venice wasn't Venice yet, but he was selling this area like, you got to come down here and invest. He was sending postcards all over the north to anybody he had an address for. He was sending them postcards and saying, we're shipping 80,000 containers of vegetables and fruits out of here every season. We're making $30 million a year in tourism money already. You really got to come down and invest. And he was also running advertisements in some of the major city newspapers around in the northern states. Well, in December of 1910, he ran an advertisement rather, in the Chicago newspaper, advising about all the opportunities for investment in a beautiful place called Florida. And Bertha Honore Palmer was sitting in her Chicago castle reading the paper and saying, maybe this is worth looking into. Her father, Honore, happened to have an office in the same building in Chicago, the Marquette building, where Joseph Lord had an office. She said, Dad, would you stop by and get some more information about this place on this west coast of Florida? So he did. And Joseph went out to the house, the castle in Chicago, gave her a real pitch. And so in February of 1911, Bertha got in her private Pullman railroad car and was joined by her dad, by her brother Adrian, and by her two sons, and they came down to Florida. They came down to Sarasota, Florida to see what it was all about. The hotel in the town at the time wasn't really anything to brag about, so there was a doctor who had a office, or really a suite of office building on the bay. His name was Halton. They emptied it out. They brought in furniture and said the Halton House made a hotel out of it. And that's where she stayed for about 2 weeks while she was here. Well, she was impressed, and she ended up buying over 140,000 acres of land. She owned at one time 1/3 of what today is Sarasota County. She had the Osprey farm. She had the Bee Ridge farm up in the north. She had another farm, not really a farm, but she had an area she called Meadow Sweet Pastures. It was her favorite. She loved it. You know it today as Myakka River State Park. Meadow Sweet Pastures was, they raised hogs out there. And I tell people she raised alligators out there too. You've been there, so you know. Anyway, she loved that. What she wanted though, or she looked at this area that we call Venice, and she said, you know, this would be a wonderful place for people of wealth to come and luxuriate in the wintertime. She pictured a winter playground, like a Palm Beach or something like that. And so she hired a architect in New York City named Levitt to come down and draw up a plan on what this city of Venice might look like. And he came down and did grandiose plans, wonderful plans, but it was too expensive. She looked at it and she said, I can't make any money on that. So they put it on a shelf, and she never got around to doing it. She died in May of, now I've lost my PowerPoint altogether. I don't even know where I'm at here. I apologize. Okay, I'm back. Anyway, the plans went on the shelf. She died in May of 1918. She had breast cancer, and she went to New York, and she had the operation, but it had gotten into her lymph nodes. And so she died in May of 1918. She never got around to developing this area. The guy in the lower right-hand corner, you may know, that's Dr. Fred Albee. And Dr. Fred Albee and his lovely wife, Luella, came here in 1914. Luella, had a cousin, her name Nash, and Mrs. and Mr. Nash lived in the main colony up in Sarasota. That's near Philippi Creek. And they spent about 2 weeks here. And Fred was so enamored with the area, he bought Nokomis. He bought Nokomis. I mean, he bought like 30 acres of coastline. He bought everything. And he bought all the land that today we consider Venice. He never got around to developing Venice because Luella said, now, Fred, you have an orthopedic office. He's a surgeon. He was a famous surgeon. You have an office in New York. You're trying to run it. You don't have time to build a city. You got to sell this property. Get rid of it. And so he was interested in finding someone to buy it. Now this gentleman, his name is George Webb. I don't know why this thing is not, we're on two different computers. You're looking at one and I'm looking at the other one, so I'm about to give up on that. This is George Webb. George was the vice president of investments for the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers in Cleveland. So his job was to take that $150 million assets and find ways to make more money with it. Great plan. In 1925, he had an investment and it lost $4 million. Now remember, the union is not a company. It's a union. It's a democracy. And the last thing that the president, or the grand chief engineer who replaced Stone, his name was Prenter, he said, you better find some way to cover that and hide the fact that we lost $4 million or our heads are going to roll. So Mr. Webb got in his car and he drove down to Florida because Florida was really going someplace. I mean, it was rocking and rolling. They were selling a lot of real estate in Florida at the time. And so he went down the east coast of Florida, looking at land opportunities. Where could we buy some land and flip it? He didn't really find anything he liked. He crossed over. He came over to Naples, and he came up the West Coast. There was some property he looked at in Fort Myers area, but it wasn't really quite what he had in mind. And so he kept coming north and eventually learned about some property that was available in Venice. Now, I throw this slide up just to show you that Florida at the time was going bonkers. I mean, there were salesmen in Miami and Jacksonville that were walking up and down the sidewalk selling land. They weren't even in an office. And some of you are old enough like me to, you remember the old line that, if you believe that, I've got some land in Florida I'd like to sell you? That's where it came from. I mean, it was going crazy. And everybody wanted a little patch of land in paradise. And so they were all coming down looking. That's why Webb was here looking at land in Florida, because it was such a great opportunity. Money was rolling, and it was a great opportunity to invest down here. This is John Nolan. I am sure most of you probably know him by face. John was not brought here by the BLE. John was actually brought here by Fred Albee. Fred and John John graduated from the Graduate School of Landscape Design at Harvard University, and Fred had gotten his medical degree from Harvard. Now, I don't think they knew each other at Harvard, but he knew if he was from Harvard, he was probably pretty good. And Nolan at the time was probably the best expert on city garden design, landscape design, a whole new concept. Came after the Civil War and continued up until really about World War I. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But anyway, Fred brought him down to this area to look at the area where Nokomis is now, to how should I design my area. So, well, I call it Fiddler's Island, and I don't know what they call it now. It's the Bayfront area, across the bridge in Nokomis. He wanted John to design that. And in 1925, Fred sent John a note and said, listen, I've got some news. I just sold the property, 1,486 acres of land, to the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers. They have deep pockets. And I'm encouraging them to keep you on to design the city of Venice. That's what they have in mind. About 6 months later, he wrote and said, I think they're going to do it. I've talked to him, and I think they're going to hire him. By the way, Fred, remember, bought the property that we're on now, Venice property, Venice Island, if you will, for $185,000. He sold it 11 months later for $1.1 million. He got a pretty good return on his investment, didn't he? In addition to that, the BLE bought all of the property from east of town, what we consider the east part of Venice, all the way to the Mayaca River, about 27,000 acres. So in the end, the BLE owned about 30,000 acres. They bought it for a total of $4 million. The same $4 million that he came down to try to replace. Now, the original plan was they were going to invest, they were going to buy the land and then flip it. That's all they were going to do. But then George Webb, who wasn't the smartest peanut, he went back to Cleveland and he said, no, we can make a lot more money, excuse me, if we develop it and turn it into a city. We'll make millions. And so they bought it. And so they hired John Nolan to come and design the city for them. I'm hopeless. Carol, come up here and help me. This is the map. You've probably seen this, the map of Venice. And you can see the contour of the land. And he really just fit it in. And that was his whole concept of the city garden plan. He said that the land followed and man followed the way. So the idea was that we don't clear cut everything and start over. We build the city within the environment. My friend Bruce Stevenson, many of you know Bruce, a classic example is the Mona Lisa. If you look at the Mona Lisa, what's the first thing you see? You see the smile. But if you look behind Mona Lisa, there's nature back there. There's a stream running behind her. So there's scenery, environment running through the painting, and much as it is with the environment. And that was John's plan, was to build and take advantage. The interesting thing I find here, too, is in this left-hand side, you'll see that part of this plan here was just pure yellow. There's no development there. That's because that was privately owned. That's where Joseph Lord owned his 90-acre orange grove. And the Heigls had some land there. There were others had oranges there. But that was private property, so they couldn't develop it because it was already privately owned. These are some shots of Tent City. So the Fuller Construction Company came in, and boy, they started working. They hired they had some 4,500 workers that were working all the time. That's the dining hall, the upper left-hand corner. There also were barracks for some of the single white men. The married couple, if they were married, they would find housing somewhere in the area as best they could. There were a lot of African Americans that were working for the BLE as well, but they lived up in Albee quarters and other communities that were already established because this was a big turpentine area, and there were other industries that preceded all of this. Tent City in the bottom left-hand corner, you're looking really from the north-south, and that's behind really where the train depot is today. But it was a tent city. And they were working almost around the clock, building the city. This is Prentice French. Prentice was a graduate of Harvard Graduate School, just like John. The one thing John liked to do, he usually worked in places where the city was already developed. And he was talking to the city people. How do you like what I've done here? Do you like this? Would you prefer that? Well, there was nobody to talk to in Venice because there was no Venice. And so they were building the city literally out of the ground, like Disney World, and he couldn't get any feedback. So he was really hoping that the BLE would also hire Prentice French to be his eyes and ears on the ground and say, well, they're liking this, they ain't liking that, maybe we ought to change this a little bit. Prentice's job was he landscaped the city. So while John was designing the city of Venice, Prentice was doing all the landscaping. And if you had a house, you had to submit plans on how you were going to landscape it, which created another problem. A lot of the business, I don't know, I don't see my notes, so I can't tell where I am in the script here, but at the beginning of 1926, there were no buildings in Venice. There was nothing here. By the end of 1926, there were 185 buildings, or buildings that were under construction. They were coming up fast. But BLE was not building all of the buildings. There were a lot of businessmen from St. Petersburg, Tampa, other major cities nearby that said, this is going to be a gold mine. There's going to be money to be made, and so we're going to go down there and we're going to invest. And so a lot of the buildings were built by private businesses. So when you walk down Venice Avenue and you see over the building, Johnson Schoolcraft building, well, there was a Mr. Schoolcraft, right? And not Kilman's, that's somebody else. This building you're seeing here in the foreground, that is the Venice Nokomis Bank. Now, Fred Albee built the Venice Nokomis Bank in Nokomis, but he knew that Venice was going to be really hot property, so he built the building right there on the corner. That's the site of the Daiquiri deck today. The building at the end of the street is the Park View Hotel. There were three hotels that were built, and that was the last of the hotels that were built. It was destroyed in 1964, and that's the present site of the post office here on the island. But a lot of businessmen did come and invest heavily in a lot of the things going on here. And why were they doing it? And the thing I always wondered, what were these people thinking? I mean, they're putting down money. Well, they weren't putting down money. That's part of the flags that you're thinking, what were they thinking when they did this? They were loaning people the money. So if you bought a house in Venice, they would give you the loan. They'd loan you the money to buy the house from them on a deferred payment plan. Now, is that stupid? Now, their money is, they're spending, we estimate, they were spending $1 million a month to build the city. Where was the money coming from? All those banks we talked about. They're all sending in money to keep it going. How much was going out? None. I mean, it was all on paper, but they weren't collecting it because they were loaning the money to build the house, and they were loaning the money to landscape the property once they got the house built, all on deferred payment. So when the inevitable happened and everything was crashing around them, they had no money to show. There was no collateral. Very sad. You probably recognize that building. It's the Burgundy Building. It's on Miami Avenue. That was by a gentleman from St. Petersburg. Name was Green, Mr. Green. The first building there, which is a real estate office now, that was an arcade. It was an automobile arcade. And you would pull your Model T in out of the sun while they changed the oil on your car. And then there was a bomber down the street. There was an elementary school one time. These buildings, all built around 1926, had various occupations over the years. But these were built by private investors, private businessmen. This was the first building that was built in Venice. It is the Hotel Venice. It was built there on Nassau Street. The wagons you see hauling the sand, that's the property, or what today would be where the Catholic Church is. It was a vacant lot at the time, and it actually stayed vacant for quite a while. I think it was vacant when I was a cadet here at the military school. Anyway, they built the hotel in 3 months at a cost of $500,000. They offered 100 rooms at the princely sum of $5 a night. But you could have a suite, but that ran $13 a night. But they all had wonderful circulating fans that kept you nice and cool. No air conditioning, of course. But it was a nice building. The first floor, they had barber shop. They had an ice machine, made 2,000 pounds of ice a day. It opened on June 21st of 1926, and the restaurant opened about 9 days later. And it was wonderful. It had cypress beam ceilings, and it had the tile, that they was so famous down here. It really was a nice place to eat. And they could seat about 100 people in there at a time. I went to the military school here that was here in the 30s through the 70s, and that's where we all ate in that restaurant. It was a nice place, nice facility. This was the second hotel that was built. This was the San Marco, and I'm sure you've seen that. That's on Tampa Avenue. They had 13 offices on the first floor. There was a medical doctor in there. They had all sorts of businesses in there. But they had a lot of gift shops and things of that nature. There were lobbies on either end of the building with working fireplaces. And then there were 90 rooms on the second and third floor. Had a working elevator. They had a water softening system. It was a very nice place to stay. I think it was $12 a night, something. But remember that they needed, the most urgent need was for space for people to stay when they came down to buy property. Because otherwise they had to stay in Sarasota at the Miramar Hotel and then bust down here to say it's going to be beautiful someday. So they needed the hotels. At one time, they actually were thinking about bringing in a cruise ship and turning it into a floating hotel. That didn't go over so well. Anyway, this was the building. The interesting thing about this building, it's a concrete block and tile. It would withstand hurricanes. Most of the other buildings on the island at that time were wood with a stucco veneer. So whenever a hurricane was threatening to hit this area, everybody in town ran to this building, and they would put the whole town up. Some of you remember Julia Cousins Lanning, and I interviewed her many times before she passed away, but she said that when she was a little girl, she remembered they would stay and they'd race up and down the halls and go in the rooms and steal all the little soaps. That was such a big deal for them at that time. But this hotel opened on December 10th. And there were other hotels in town. I won't go into those. Small hotels. But there were rooms, and they kept making them available. Let's talk a little bit about the Venice Farms. This was also they were spending an inordinate amount of money developing all that land between the east of Venice all the way to the Mayaca River, 27,000 acres. The idea, they kind of got it from Bertha Palmer and the farms that she was building up in Sarasota. They created little 5 and 10 acre farmettes, very small farms. And the idea would be, if you're a farmer in Indiana or Ohio, and by November you ain't got nothing to do. I mean, you're maybe putting hay in the barn, but that's about it. The idea was they could come down here and they could maybe raise 2 or 3 different levels of crops. They had a working demonstration farm of cows. They were milking the cows. They had a chicken. They had a demonstration of a chicken poultry farm. And of course, they were growing everything here: celery, watermelon, so forth and so on. Very popular. And they also would, they would till the land for you. They made it so easy for you to farm this thing. They did everything but come out with a hoe and help you rake it up. They estimated that a person could buy a farmette with a house on the property and get them up and running for $10,000. It's a lot of money in 1926, but still manageable. And a number of people did invest in it. Didn't work out. I just throw this up to kind of show you. I love that. They're selling land for $15 an acre. I mean, it was crazy what was going on here in the 20s in terms of Florida boom. So why did it go bust? Well, a number of things. One, they had the great hurricane that came across South Florida. Lake Okeechobee overflowed its banks. Hundreds of people drowned. It was a horrible thing, and people up north. So I don't think I want to be any part of that. And the market down here was oversaturated. Remember, they've been selling real estate on the street. I mean, it was crazy. And so there wasn't really a market for it. So what did Venice do? Yeah, it doesn't bother us. We're just going to keep right on developing, because this is just going to work just fine. We're much better than they are, and there's money to be made, and we're going to make it. By March of 1926, the lawyers, the BLE lawyers, they came down here and they looked around and they went back to Cleveland and they said, "You got a problem. You're in so over your head, they're going to lock you up and throw away the key. You got a problem." And so that was the first point. And strangely enough, the officers in Cleveland didn't seem to be really aware of the money they were spending down here. Webb's company car was a Lincoln Continental convertible. But it was just amazing. So as I said before, they were spending $1 million a month developing Venice, because their belief, and John Nolan agreed with them, let's build the infrastructure first. Let's put in the streets. Let's put in the stormwater, the irrigation, the electric. Let's do everything, and then we'll build houses. Okay, maybe that makes sense. It didn't make sense to me, but that's what they were doing. Anyway, they were spending $1 million as best we can tell, $1 million a month. That got cut when, and by the end of 26, they realized this thing's out of control, and they were told you're only going to spend $30,000 a month. And so Fuller started laying off everybody off. They weren't doing much of anything. But the people were still dancing. The people that bought houses here, they thought, it can't go bad because it's too big to fail. Just keep remembering that. That's what the salesmen were telling people buying homes. We can't go bust. This is too big to fail. It's huge. And so people bought that. And the Hotel Venice had a little courtyard there. They called it the Orange Grove. Had little orange trees, right, Ron, with little orange globes in them, and they were dancing. The hotel had its own orchestra. Anthony Lopez and his Orange Grove Serenaders. Every Wednesday, Saturday night, they're dancing away. They thought, nothing can happen. It's too big to fail. And so people continue to party, but so it goes. Now, the BLE, again, they're a democracy. Every member of the group has a vote. And so they had triennial conventions. Every 3 years, they would get together and say, what are you doing? How's our money? How much are you making? And so forth. And it was at the 1927 triennial convention that a lot of this started coming out. Keep in mind that the rank and file of the BLE had no idea that this was going on. They had no idea where their money was going. And so their meeting in Cleveland, I think this meeting was in Cleveland, and they're hearing this for the first time, and it starts leaking out. And at that point, a lot of the creditors started getting nervous and say, we want our money and we want it now. Normally, those conventions went on for a month. This one cost $1 million, went on for at least months, maybe more. The decision was made by the rank and file, get out of Venice, get out. Sell it as fast as you can. There was a guy named Prenter was fired, by the way, Prenter was fired, and 3 of the senior executives that knew what was going on, they were fired. What else? Oh, I was going to say, and I think it comes up in a minute, but Bud Wimmers was the assistant treasurer for this project. He was kept on down here to serve as receiver, because they had to decide what to do. Do we declare bankruptcy and run, or do we just put it in receivership? Because remember, a lot of their members were buying into this, buying bonds and buying into this, and they didn't want to throw them under the bus. So they decided we'll continue to try to figure out how to do it. I love the committee's, the saying here at the bottom. We cannot help but reach the conclusion that this venture was nothing more nor less than downright stupidity. And it was. A book published later by the Princeton University Press reflect on the losses, the error of judgment, betrayals of confidence, nepotism, inefficiency, and extravagance that permeated the financial system. Were brought home suddenly to the bewildered delegates. These people were just slack-jawed. They couldn't believe what they were hearing, that this could have gone on. I can't help but wonder, and I don't have any proof of this, but I think everybody bought into this business about we're too big to fail. We'll just keep getting money. And of course, what happened at this point, because there was no collateral on the money the banks were all sending them, they all started collapsing. So they had to start selling the banks and getting out of the banking business, right? It was a mess, absolute mess. You recognize that building. You probably call it the El Patio Hotel, maybe something newer than that. Originally, it was called the Ennis Arcade. It was built by Stanton Ennis. He was the guy chief involved in selling the properties and stuff here in town, and he and his wife built the arcade, and he loved it. I love this. You wouldn't ride behind a locomotive driven by a banker, right? And for the same reason, you don't want to trust your savings to a locomotive engineer. Yeah, he wrote a book afterwards in 1929 that really outlined how this whole thing went bad, and he blamed George Webb largely for the collapse, for the failure. This was published in the New York Times shortly after the 1930 triennial. And they basically are saying here that they're going to try to work it out. They're going to try to recover the money as best they can. $15 million. We don't know how much money they lost. They never disclosed how much they lost. All we can go on is we know, Ennis actually added up all of the money that was owed that we knew about, and it came to about $15 million. Fred Albee still owned the paper on a lot of those buildings, so a lot of it referred back to him. One of the Blackburns, Albert Blackburn, he was involved with developing the Venice farms. He ended up getting back a lot of that land. But lawsuits went on for decades trying to resolve all this. I wish I had the slide to tell you how much, but they had miles of roads, stormwater, all the utilities, everything left behind. 3 empty hotels. They built all this stuff and it just sat. There was nothing left. That's the Gulf of Mexico, by the way. That's right down where the pavilion is today. You can see they were just empty lots. And people left. They just put on their cars, their Model A's, whatever they could stuff into the car, and they just left. They left the house unlocked with whatever they couldn't take with them. They left it in the house and went back to live with Aunt Minnie up in Baltimore or something. So, yeah, it was pretty rough. How would you like to go up against that guy? Not a friendly face, is it? Alvaney Johnson, he was worked for the railroad for many, many years. He was a chief engineer. He replaced Prenner when Prenner was shown the door. Alvaney was brought in. He served as the head poobah, until 1950. Very well thought of. And so what did they do to try to recover the money? Well, they supposedly raised $10 million with what they call loyalty loans. You could borrow money to help them dig out of it. But the sad part, at least in my mind, was that 57,000 members of the Brotherhood were assessed $5 a month. Those that had been active prior to January of 27. They were assessed $5 a month. It doesn't seem like a lot of money, but if you're a locomotive engineer in 1926, every dollar counts. And this is now during the Depression, and these people are suffering, and so they had to pay it off. I don't know any locomotive engineers, but I've talked to some of the people who had uncles and fathers and grandfathers, and they suffered. It was sad. And in their report, this is good, to the BLE leadership, what they're saying is the Committee of 8 concluded, this was the Committee of 10, but 2 were off by this time. Had the enterprise we are engaged in been handled honestly and with only a small degree of intelligence, we today would stand abreast of the world's greatest institutions. It was a good idea. It was a good idea. And if it hadn't been a depression to drive the nails in the coffin, and they hadn't, times had been better and sales had continued, it probably would have sustained better than it did. We were very fortunate in town because we had 3 angels. We had the Kentucky Military Institute that came here in 1932. They stayed until 1970, and that pumped a lot of money into the economy. Of course, we had the Army Air Base here from 1942 to 45. That brought a lot of money. There were 10,000 people on that base, 6,000 on the base, 10 times the size of the city itself. And then, of course, we had the circus, and they were only here for about 6 weeks at a time, but they pumped a lot of money into the community as well. That dug us out of the hole. It's a great idea, a great concept. It was just bungled by some poor locomotive engineers. So that's really all I have to share with you. Any of you have any questions? And I didn't really cover a lot of Venice history. I wanted to focus more on this. But. Yes.
Does anybody in our current VAHS board keep in touch with the current Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers?
That's a good question. I can only speak for myself. You have?
That we've been trying,
Yes, that was my answer.
believe this or not, they don't want to respond to us
Yeah,
100 years later. Still embarrassed.
yeah. And I've reached out to the person who's the public relations person for the BLE in Cleveland, and he never responded. I think they're just embarrassed, and they just have a bad taste, which is unfortunate because what started as a bad investment really turned out to be a great opportunity for Florida. I think if it had run better, I think it could have equaled Palm Beach or Coral Gables. I do.
I wrote a special letter to the chief engineer.
You did?
He's not yet responded. I did talk to the PR guy.
Oh, did you?
The only one that responds, but they don't want to have anything to do with Venice 100 years later. It's my view, they're so embarrassed by the situation, they don't want their name attached to it anymore. Now, you would think a nice town like this, they'd love to have their name abandoned, not so far. So, we're going to keep trying.
Maybe if we offered to buy some loyalty bonds, maybe that
Loyalty bonds.
There was a time where those of us that were giving tours at the depot, got really interested in contacting the president of Brotherhood at that time. And lo and behold, he came down here with some of his other officers. So there was a time they were really interested.
They dedicated the plaque that's down in the depot right now.
Right.
No interest now yet. We're going to keep trying.
Larry, you mentioned that there were 35 banks that participated with the BLE,
Mhm.
and you said that when the loans, or when the money was coming in, it was coming in from a lot of those different banks. Is that right?
Mhm.
Did I understand?
that was their source of revenue.
So my question is, was Venice the only project in the country then, or were there other mistakes being made?
Yeah.
You know?
This was their major investment at that time. They'd been making some others, as I said earlier, that did not do well. Webb was not a particularly smart man. Gary is here. Gary Youngbird's grandfather was the original chief engineer for the city and later became mayor of Venice. And I've heard the story from you and from other people that George was on the street in Venice at some point, and George Webb came up to him and asked if he could share some pocket change. He died broke in Venice, in Miami. But yeah, he was the principal architect for its demise, I would say, of what I've read. You know.
The newspaper in Miami published his obituary and explained that he was penniless.
Any other questions?
Well,
Not that guy.
And this is similar, just an extension of your question. Was city building something that was going on in Florida where people were going around saying, you know, we're going to build an entire city from scratch? Or was Venice, you know, was something unique that way? You know, Coral Gables, I don't think, or Palm Beach, I mean, they weren't just conceived and built as, you know, and delivered as is. They were, you know, most cities grow organically, right? Was city building something that was in vogue in the 1920s in Florida?
Well, in some ways, but they were done better. Coral Gables was being developed about the same time as Venice, but it was being done a little bit more like a builder would do it, kind of in increments, right? So, you know, they were managing their money. I don't believe, I could be wrong, but I don't believe anybody from Cleveland was auditing what was going down here, the books, during that time. That was part of the problem. This came as a shock in 1927 when they were all gathered together and said, my God, what have you done? We didn't know any of this was going on. It was really, I mean, the major newspapers in America were covering that convention. It was that big a deal. Yeah,
I
Bethany.
just had a comment, actually, there's a great book called Bubble in the Sun that's about Henry Flagler and that whole development of the East Coast that speaks to a lot of the cities on the East Coast that were developed kind of around the same time. But more so, I just want to say kudos for this presentation without your notes. Well done.
You know, and that is part of the problem was too. West Coast was not really developed much by that time. It still was pretty much, underdeveloped. The famous line was when Henry Plant built his hotel up in Tampa. He invited Henry Flagler to come over from Palm Beach and St. Augustine to come over to visit his hotel. And Flagler telegrammed him back and said, "Where is Tampa?" And Plant said, "Just follow the crowds."
Just want to let the audience know another community that John Nolan did from scratch, the ground up, was Marymount, Ohio. So that's another example. And later this season, I will be delivering a presentation about comparing and contrasting those two John Nolan communities. It'll be interesting.
It is interesting, and if you go to Marymount and you walk around, I can see John's handprints in this town, just like in Venice.
Was anybody prosecuted or any legal action taken against anybody?
I don't know that any wasn't imprisoned. I think the BLE was embarrassed by what had happened. This got nationwide, probably international attention. This was the death of the of the labor banks. That whole concept, it died. I mean, and I think they were largely embarrassed, and they were. That's my guess. That they didn't want to bring any more attention to themselves. Prenner was fired. He died shortly after that. The vice presidents that were fired, 3 of them, they were kind of, they just drifted away. Yeah.
Larry, were you ever told by Julia Cousins Lanning that, and this would be like what you were asking, George Webb got tarred and feathered, and the wife stayed, and George got kicked out of town? The wife stayed with one of the local farmers. Did you ever hear that?
No, I've never heard that.
Julia liked smut. She did. She really did. That is what she told me when she came to stay at our house. That and about the swingers, but that's another story.
He should have been.
The swingers.
He should have been.
Yeah, that's what she said happened.
Yeah. Well, is that it? Yes, sir.
Yes, I noticed on the BLE logo that there's a Canadian flag on it.
Mhm.
Are there ties?
Yes, there are ties to Canada. Yeah, it's America and Canada. I think the Canadians, there are members in Canada. So it covered both countries, yeah. And it's still a grueling, Carol and I were on a cruise not long ago, and we were one of the couples we met. He retired from being a locomotive engineer. It still is a rough life. You think maybe I'll just go out for 4 hours and bring the train back. Doesn't work that way. They're on the road hours. It's like flying an airliner. There's a lot of stuff going on, so it's tough. Thank you very much for your time.
Don't go away. We've got a book raffle. Come on up. Why don't you have Betty draw the first number? I don't either. We all need our glasses. Okay, the last 4 is 3650. 3650. Going once? Going twice?
Hey, Tommy, do we have 3650?
Hold on.
Just a fix. So the way this works, you get to choose whatever book you want from the back.
I am.
3640. 3640. 3640. All right. Sue? 3654. All right. I'm glad you didn't draw this one. I got it. I'm sorry, I'll take it. Three, 643. 3643. All right, Ken. Oh. The next number, 3642. 3642. Now, come on, that's not fair. We're going to break that string right now. 3653.
That's me, but let it go. I already won once.
All right, the next number is 3641.
I'll give that to somebody else. Get a book, Bill.
Give it to, okay. Right here. Lady in front. Yeah, one more. I'll pick the last one. It'll be mine. The last one is 3649. 3649. All right, lady in the back. Lady in the balcony. Now, I remind you, if you bought a book from Larry tonight, you'll be glad to autograph it in the back. So, thank you all for coming.